Hello there, cadre. Obviously not a shave video. Um, just had the house to myself. We had an awesome tasting experience. A trip up to Napa. Man, the glare on these. I tried to shut the drapes a little bit to get rid of some of the glare, but such is life in sunny California. It's actually overcast, but it's bright outside. Anyway, I kind of like, there's a couple YouTuber shaver guys that can just, they've got enough followers that they can just stream live and just kind of have a conversation. And I know I don't have that, though it would be fun, but I thought I'd just shoot a video. Some folks have asked questions about wine, whether in the cadre or some of my friends. And while I don't really want to do I think a quote educational series, I thought we'd just sit down, share a glass. I'd share some of my thoughts of my journey, and so forth and so on. So I wish I had some background music for you. I had some classical stuff playing earlier, and we talked about this on the cadre, actually, about being able to add background music to your videos. I didn't want to like overlay, but just like, play something in the room. But YouTube cracks down on that stuff, and I can get it. But man, it'd be nice. I mean, I'm obviously not trying to use it to advertise and stuff like that. So it'd just be nice if, there was some realistic rules around that. But it's just me, man. So I thought I'd share just how I got into wine and where I am now. Again, if you're not big into wine, you skip to the next video and we'll do shaving again. But I didn't like wine at all until I met my wife. And I don't know if I actually tried it. I'm sure I had, but it just didn't appeal to me for some reason, and I didn't think I liked it. And at that time, what I knew about wine was there was red wine and white wine. And I knew that there was other, varietals and things. I didn't know the word varietal, I can guarantee you that. Excuse me. Still getting over that junk from weeks ago. But yeah, that was it. And I went to her apartment once. She made me dinner and pasta, and she opened a wine, and I thought, well, heck, I better not say anything. I better look like, of course I drink wine. I'm sophisticated and all this, and it was pretty good. So I don't know if it was that I couldn't tell you what we drank. Obviously, a lot of wines are better with food, so maybe that was it. I don't know. Maybe I know I have never had wine with a meal till then. Anyway, so it wasn't as bad as I thought. And then down the road, she asked if I'd ever been to Napa. We live about an hour and a half from the start in Napa. And I said no. And she had a winery that was pretty cool that had, pretty big, very commercial. I think you could buy food there. They had a gift shop, all this stuff. So she said, let's go up for the day. And it was pretty cool. And it was one of those things where just made you feel a little bit more mature, like you're doing the stuff adults should be doing, things like that. Oh man, and I tried to fix it. I got this little whoop-de-doo in my hair after it dried. It just won't go away. My makeup guy is gone. It's a holiday, so hair and makeup, had to do it myself today. But anyway, Napa was beautiful. So that started that whole thing. I thought, had some stuff I didn't like, had some stuff I liked. I think we were doing tastings. They were like $20 for the tasting. And so every now and again, we'd go up to Napa. And it's, there's a lot of that in the Bay Area. When I first moved down here, I didn't realize that San Jose was like right next to Oakland and Berkeley and San Francisco, like all these big names that you heard of. It's all right here. Same with Napa, just all the big name wineries that most people would have at least heard of, just kind of on this one road, and you can just drive past it, and there's that, and there's that, and all that. So that's pretty cool. And at that time, we buy a couple wines here and there, but I kind of thought, and we were drinking, I think Man, sorry about that. Drinking wines that I think were probably like $25, 25 dollars. Yes, Napa, so there's nothing that's like $10 up there. Um, and I was thinking, well, this tastes fine to me. Why in the world would you pay like $50 for a bottle of wine? What in the world could be the difference? So that's one of the things I want to talk about today. Just what is the difference between a $20 bottle of wine and a $75 bottle of wine or on up? And but I don't know what happened, but at one time a lot of wineries you can get your basic tasting that costs maybe $15 a person, and it's their basic wines. Especially the bigger wineries, they make a lot of different wines, like Krug and I don't even shop at them, so I'm trying to think. Behringer, um, man. Anyway, pick a big name. If it's from Napa, they got a huge range of wines. I can guarantee you, the wineries there, especially so let's take like Charles Krug. Um, Been around forever. You see their wines, at least in the grocery stores here. I'd imagine they distribute across the country. But if you go to Napa, they may or may not sell the wines that they have in the grocery store. But then there are also wines that are distributed to better restaurants, and then usually they'll have wines that you can only get at the winery itself. So there's a wide range of wines you can try there. And one time we just decided to step it up a level in our tasting, and I'm like, I guess I'd done enough tasting at that point where I noticed the difference. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. And that's how the story goes. And so as you start drinking those wines, and then you try ones that are a little bit higher level and higher level. And so anyway, that's where we are now. You can see there we got one of the wine fridges. This is kind of the quote wine room that I have set up finally. That's just supposed to be a place just to chill out and relax and that kind of thing. So anyway, we're going to open a Zinfandel. So yeah, so through that process, I didn't write anything down, didn't take notes and stuff, but just did it enough. I started learning that, geez, it's not just red wine and white wine. There's a huge difference between a Zinfandel and a Cabernet and a Merlot. And tasting them enough, I start remembering the differences and that type of a thing. So we're going to be having, it's Memorial Day. Happy Memorial. It's my mother's birthday. Happy birthday, moms. Hi, everybody say happy birthday to my mom. Happy birthday, Mom. All right. This is what can you see? 2015 Zinfandel. It's from this great producer called Limerick Lane. They're actually in Sonoma. So almost all of our wines are from the Napa Valley. Sonoma is just north of that. I mean, kind of where the valley stops. There's Sonoma. But this place is known for their Zinfandels. You can see it says 1910 block. And this is pretty sweet. We actually went to this winery finally, because all right, I get into some of this stuff later, but I also like art a lot. And same with art, it's much cooler if you know the story behind it. And the best is if you can meet the artists themselves, right? Because then it means a lot more. You're looking at your art and you have a story behind it, all that stuff. Same with wine. For me, when I'm able, I like to go to the wineries, buy direct from the wineries, and then you've got this picture in your head when you're drinking the wine of where it came from and the people involved and that kind of stuff. So anyway, this place has a block in their vineyard that was planted in 1910. So these are old vine. You heard the term old vine Zinfandels. Most wines, the vines will produce for 20, maybe 30 years, and then they stop dropping off production. The quality isn't good. You have to rip them all up, replant them all, wait a few more years, and then you can start harvesting again. Well, Zins, for some reason, have a great following with the old vines, and they're so cool looking. You know, a younger vine's going to be this big, and an old old Zinfandel vine is big and thick and craggly and all this. I mean, it just looks like it's been around. So you just think of all the stuff that's been happening in the world since 1910, and these vines have been there producing grapes since then. Anyway, I was saying we're going to have hot dogs for dinner. I don't. Maybe a Merlot would be better. Anyway, I'm not one of those that says this goes with this and this goes with this, other than a little bit of flavor. But I love red wines. Not so many white wines that I even enjoy. So I'll have, typical, if you have fish, you have a white wine. If you have chicken, you have a, no way. At our wedding, we had wines and they went around with the whites to start saying, nope, start me off with the cab. I'm just going to, you drink what you like. And that's what I tell anybody when they ask about, well, do you know about this wine that I have and that wine? I'm like, I don't want to give my opinion. If you enjoy it, then enjoy it. It shouldn't matter what the number rating is, what anybody says about it. Just like shaving, right? If you like some wacko blade that everybody else gets ripped up, who cares? Yeah, it's your shave. You do what you want, right? So anyway, I'm going to open this dude. The whole purpose of it, I'm just going to tell you my story, free-thinking, a little bit about the difference, like I said, between cheap wine and expensive wine. Some of the things I've learned throughout my journey. So anyway, as you can see there, keep, I think almost all of our wines in some kind of climate-controlled deal. Don't feel like even if you have 8-10 bottles you need to do that unless you're aging your stuff. The whole reason we've got that is that for the most part we're not drinking it in the year that we buy it, except for whites. You can drink those younger, but if you're not aging your stuff, you don't need a special wine fridge. The big thing is you try to minimize variation up and down and up and down and up and down in temperatures. You'd like a steady temp, so that's why like sticking it in a closet would be great, inside rather than in your garage where in the summertime it could get hot or below freezing, that kind of stuff. But other than that, just the one place I'd say you don't put it in it. It's frustrating because modern homes I think are just built for aesthetics. Is not above your fridge and not next to your stove, and you'll see some modern homes with the kind of cross hatch wood pattern where you can slide in the bottles of wine. They'll be right above the fridge or right next to the stove, and that's where all the heat's going, right? So you got to get it all heated up and cooled down, and it might get too hot in the first place. So anyway, but even on your kitchen counter is better than that. So don't feel like if you want to start buying more than 1 or 2 bottles at a time that you've got to have a wine fridge, that kind of stuff. That's only if you're going to keep it more than a couple of years, get a wine fridge. But even like 2 years, I don't think I'd worry about it. Opening the bottle, a lot of stuff with wine is either tradition or superstition or what have you. A lot of people just cut the top off. If you're going to do that, the convention is there's a glass lip here. You cut it off here and not here. It just looks better. I'll show you. I got this cool little cutter. All those silver things are rolling cutting heads, so you can just stick it on top of your wine bottle here. You can kind of squeeze it together, go back and forth, and it pops. There it is. Just pops the top right off there, and then you just pull the cork out. And aesthetically, it looks kind of cool leaving this on here. Most of the time, it's just me or my wife drinking. This is the bottle opener that I use. It's just a basic. Probably wasn't more than 10, at least not more than 20 bucks. And it's got a little blade on it. And in theory, you could use that to cut this off. I'll tell you, almost all the time, I just use it to rip up from the bottom, like that, and I just pull this whole thing off, just because it's so much easier and quicker than cutting the top off and making it look pretty. Again, it's your wine, do what you want. This isn't sacrilegious, it's just easy. I don't think I'll get into a whole lot of, um, again, one thing that I used to hear, and I think some people still believe, is about keeping the bottle on its side and you rotate it and you rotate it every, if you're aging the stuff. That's a misconception. That's with how they do champagne, and while they're making champagne, because they've got the lees and all the yeast and all that junk on the bottom, and they kind of want to keep it rotating and in suspension. Once it's made and in the bottle and ready to drink, you don't need to rotate it. The purpose of keeping it on its side, which is true, is to keep the cork moist. The idea being is if it's up like this, and this is going to eventually dry out and air is going to get in there. Now some air does get through the cork. That's the purpose of a cork. And aging is the only way it ages is if there's a little bit of oxygen transfer between the outside and the bottle. If it's completely sealed, there's nothing. It's the oxygen that slowly changes your wine, that results in the aging. But you want that to happen extremely slowly and somewhat controlled. So just like if you open a bottle of wine, then all of a sudden it's got all access to all the oxygen it can use, and depending on your taste, within 24 hours or 48 hours, it's pretty much undrinkable at that point. So you don't want this to dry and crack, and then all of a sudden your wine's going to go bad. But again, I don't know the time frame on that. I would say, probably a year. I would not worry about it laying down. So if you're buying stuff, you buy 1 or 2 bottles at a time and it just sits on your counter until you're ready to drink it months later, you're going to be fine. This stuff sits on the shelves upright like this. This stuff in a lot of wineries sits in the boxes like this. Some higher end places will actually stick it in the boxes like this. But anyway, yeah, don't worry about it. So, I'm going to use one of these dudes. I just opened it up. It's just, I think it's called 2-step corkscrew, but it just gives you more leverage. So you just stick in the corkscrew in the middle here, get it started, and we're going to go down. Now there's mechanical ones that give you a lot more mechanical advantage. It's easier, but now see, I got this screwed up. I'm off center there, so by quite a bit. So it will be okay. Things do happen, but you want to stop screwing this in when there's still 1 turn left here. And the reason is, if you go all the way up to the hub, or whatever you want to call this, the brake here, this is made long enough that it'll poke out the bottom of your cork. And if it pokes out the bottom of your cork, then there's a chance that a little piece of cork is going to go into your wine. Whereas if you stop with 1 doodad up there, that's not going to happen. So same thing with any opener that jams all the way through. They can be much more convenient. Your wine, do what you want, but you risk poking little pieces of cork into your wine, which isn't the end of the world. You just fish it out with your finger, flick it outside, and you're ready to go. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to hold this up while I'm doing this, but the whole purpose of these 2 steps is you go with the first one. There we go. And it gives you some leverage, but that's all the further you can go. So now you go up to the second step, and then it gives you more leverage again. Now, the idea isn't that you just like that. One, wine can splatter a little bit. So it's a controlled thing. You do it till it's almost all the way out, and then you're just going to wiggle it. And I don't know if you heard that. It was a little, but it doesn't need to be out. Technically it's the same way with champagne, is that when you learn the right way to open champagne, if you're taking a class or something like that, is not poop and it goes shooting off and you hope you're not aiming at anybody. It's that it is wiggled off slowly, controlledly. You hear a little psh, and then it's still in your hand. So anyway, let's set that down. So you can see it hasn't poked out the end of the cork, so there's no concern about that. I'm not going to talk a lot about you know, being snooty with wine and stuff. It just should enjoyed to be drank. But one thing to note, you know, if you're in a, and again I'll say there's lots of different opinions. There's not a lot. How do I want to say this? I was gonna say there's not a lot scientific. There is a lot of chemistry and stuff behind wine, but there's also a lot of theory that can't be proven, stuff like that. Most people say if you're in a restaurant, something like that, smelling the cork, that's not going to tell you if the wine is good or not. I've never smelled the cork in my life in the restaurant. I think other than maybe the first or second time I ordered because they hand it to you. But now I'm just say, just go ahead and pour it. One thing you can do is look all the way around. Again, if you're just getting it from the store and drinking it, it should be fine. But a sign that this is dried out would be that these little red streaks that only go to about there would be farther down. That means that your wine's been leaking. There might be some concern, nothing you can do about it. Well, there you go. So, I'll pour a glass. Now, wine glasses, again, I just use what I like. I'm not too caught up on this is a red glass, this is a white glass. A couple of things I will say with reds, if you want to enjoy it as much as you can, you do want something with a big opening so it lets kind of the vapors kind of collect, and the smell of red wine is part of the enjoyment. And that's why you see people doing this. The whole point is to get some of those vapors released so that when you smell it, there's actually something there to smell. Now you see that? You don't stick your nose all the way in there. Just at the edge. And then one thing I learned in one of the wine classes that made a difference for me is that you slowly pull it away. You give a little distance and you'll notice the scent change just a little bit. But again, really technically the only thing that you're looking for there for me is just enjoying it. I love the smell of most red wines and just getting a sense of trying to pick out the fruits and things like that in it. Oh, here's something. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. You hear about the legs. And I know I used to think, I've been told that has to do with the quality of the wine. Can you see that? Yeah, you can kind of see how they're dribbling down there. And better wine's going to have better legs. That has nothing to do with it, man. That has to do with sugar content of the wine. This could be the nastiest jug stuff excuse me, there is. And if it's got a lot of residual sugar, it's going to have legs on it. So don't get caught up in that. Just enjoy. Some things, if you're really looking at quality of wine, and be looking at the edges when you tilt it down. If you start seeing some browning, or they call it brick color, where it turns instead of like a ruby red or a bright red or something, that's showing that it's starting to get pretty aged. Again, nothing you need to worry about if you're buying wine just from the store and drinking it. But the one thing that drives me nuts on TV, in movies, things like that, and again, if you want to do it, whatever, is people walking around like this. I get maybe at a party, it's a safety thing or whatever. The reason you don't walk around like this is you got all the heat from your hands starting to heat up your wine. And wine is not meant to be drank warm at all. There's a lot of discussion, white wines are drank cooler than red wines, which is true for the best flavors. But red wines, they're supposed to be drank at, quote, room temperature, but that was room temperature back 100 years ago in France when room temperature was like 62 degrees. So if you want to get the most enjoyment out of your wine, I would suggest if it's summertime and it's been sitting on your kitchen counter, throw it in the fridge for half an hour, bring it down a little bit. That's one of the very few things I'll mention when we're doing tastings, is if they poured the wines and they don't air condition the winery, and they're not keeping the wines in a fridge or something like that. So they're like 75, 80 degrees. They taste thin. It's not doing them any favors. And I'll point out, you know, I think you're serving these a little warm. They could taste better if, and that's something that they should know. It's not being too snotty. So you hold it down here, but you will see a lot of. I'll post on the "What Are You Drinking Tonight?" I've got stemless glasses. So again, you drink how you want. I'll use those at the dinner table and stuff, so we're not worried about these big glasses getting knocked over, things like that. Cheers. Good stuff. I'm not going to get a lot into tasting that kind of stuff. You like what you like. And just by tasting, getting the experience and learning the differences in the different grapes and things like that. What I will say, a couple of things to look for. If you learn, there's two big notes other than just the flavor is acidity and the tannins. Acidity you can note by the watering it makes on the sides of your tongue. The more watering and the longer it lasts, usually the higher acidity there is in the wine. And then the tannins is kind of that sandpapery, dry mouth, drying feeling you can get. It tends to be more from red wines than white wines because the tannins are in the skins. And good quality wine, that's one thing I'll say about higher end, lower end wines, is that there's a balance in that. If you don't have any acidity, it's going to taste very flat. But if you have too much acidity and it's not balanced out by the tannins, then it's just going to taste kind of sour. I don't know how else to put it. But then everybody has their preference. That's one of the things that I found tasting is that I started with Napa wines, and that's pretty much all that I like at this point. Not to be snotty or anything. I've tried tasting all sorts of wines from all sorts of places, mostly because Napa is one of the most expensive places you can get wine. So if I could learn to like something else or find something else, that would be great. But in a lot of the world, they're made more acidic, meant to go with food. They're meant to be drank with food, whereas Napa, they're more jammy, less acidic. You can sit here and just sip on one without needing the fats from the food to kind of cut through the acidity of the wine. But that's a very French and old school way to make wine, is higher acidity. Excuse me. So that's it. Anyway, but I see where Chris Noir, you're gonna, I don't know if you care about this stuff, but dude, I haven't even shaved and I'm almost at half an hour. I just want to sit and chat with you guys. So we'll see if we can wrap this up by 45 minutes or so. But I did want to talk about the difference between inexpensive and expensive wines, what you're getting for your money. And again, drink what you like. Don't feel like you need to spend a certain amount. But like art, you know, wine is, I don't want to get too frou-frou about it. But it's not just scientific. There's a science part, there's the chemicals, but then there's the art part where you're taking a natural ingredient, transforming it into something else. That every year you're starting with a different type of ingredient to begin with because of the harvest that year, the weather that year, what have you. And how you treat it defines the outcome, the product at the end, right? And I like to think about everything that goes into this. And that's where I get a lot of the enjoyment out of drinking wine. So let's talk about that. So what's the difference between mass-produced 15 bottle? I've seen, there used to be $2 chuck, so you can get wine for dollars up to whatever. I mean, sky's the limit, right? Some Napa stuff goes for $1,200. I think maybe even up new, upon release. It's hard as heck to get. But start with the land. So California mass produces a lot of wine. Very little of the wine that comes out of California comes from Napa. Most of it's in Central California. If you're driving down from here to Disneyland, you'll pass big fields full of vineyards, just like you would corn or wheat or whatever. And those are into production. I mean, they want to get as much production as possible out of those vines. So, a couple differences between that and Napa. One is, trying to think of how to do this. So one is location. So Napa is world famous because of the geology there. They've got, I don't know how many different soil types, and that's actually pretty important that they have. Most areas have a few different soil types. Napa has, I don't remember what it is, like a third to half of the different soil types in the world are there. And you can tell that in the wines. There's one winery that we go to that has the same varietal of grape, the same strain of that varietal, two different vineyards with just a road separating the two. And you can drink wines from here and wines from here and taste the difference. And the only difference is the soil that it's grown in. So Napa has an amazing climate. It gets cool at night. You get the ocean breezes through it, but then it heats up in the summer, and that's what grapes, or during the day in the summertime, but that's what grapes need to get that full flavor, get the sugars that transform into the alcohol. So anyway, so you've got that in Napa, and the land is very expensive because there's a limited amount of it. The valley is not that big. If I remember right, it's what I'm guessing now, but it's not that big. It's like 7 miles wide by 15 or 20, something like that, and that's all in Napa Valley. So the wine now, or the land now, goes for, like, some of the top land can be $1 million an acre because that's all there is of it. There's no more. They can't expand, and they're making world-class wines. Versus your $2 chuck or jug of this or whatever is made in a big, huge field. Don't really. I'm sure they care about the soil, but I'm sure they're also adding chemicals to it and not worried about the soil changing from here to there. Then it's just one big, huge field. In the big field, they are watering it to get as many grapes to grow as big as possible. In Napa, they do the opposite. They try not to water. The harder the vines have to work to get to the water, the stronger they are. The smaller the fruit is, the more intense the flavor is in the individual berry versus mass production. They just want volume. Napa, their high-end producers, are known for actually cutting off groups of berries so that they get the concentrated flavor in fewer groups. So on this expensive land, per acre, you're actually growing quite a bit less fruit, which then jacks up the price. In the valley, you're doing all machine labor. They even have machine pickers that go through and shake the things and shake the grapes loose and stuff. In Napa, arguably some of the best wines come from the hillside. The steeper the hill, the better. Again, because the water runs off, it doesn't hold the water, so the vines have to work harder to get down through. A lot of it's chalky volcanic soil to get to the water. So in Napa, they will work on the hillside, which is all hand labor. They will cut off some bunches of grapes as soon as they start to grow to concentrate the flavors into fewer bunches. And then it's all hand labor harvesting. It's just guys with buckets. And even not only that, so most of Napa is hand harvested. A lot of places will do it in the middle of the night when it's cool, so the sun hasn't hit the grapes yet. But they'll harvest into these little buckets that they can carry and then dump them into the pretty big ones that they'll move around with forklifts. Well, the highest end places won't even dump them into the big ones because they don't want the weight of the fruit starting to squish on itself. Excuse me. So you've got more expensive land, Napa. You've got manual labor throughout the whole year in Napa versus tractors, that can cover acres and acres and acres a day. You've got lower production per acre in Napa, and we haven't even started making the wine yet. So you pick the grapes in the mass production thing. They're just picking, washing, they'll sort the stems out, and then they make their wine. In Napa, sort of the same thing, except it's done by hand instead of some wineries have machines. Excuse me, sorry about that. But the highest end ones, the sorting's all done by hand originally, and then they rent out optical sorters. And it's 6 figures just to rent out an optical sorter for a season. But it's pretty cool. I've seen them working, and the berries will be shooting past cameras, lightning fast, and the computer will take pictures of every individual berry, and if it's not the right size or the right color, a little poof of air shoots it out of the stream. So there's added expense there. You got 6 figures to do optical sorting to end up with just the best fruit. Then you get into the production side of things. Sorry about that, just need to grab some water. So then you start making the wine. Much like a chef, because this is not just by chemistry, it's a lot of feel, knowing history, overcoming some things that might have happened throughout that year in the vineyards. The winemaker makes a difference. So Napa Valley, they're paying top dollar at the top wineries to get the best winemaker they can. They're like rock stars up there. Some people follow the winemaker around. If they start making wine or consulting somewhere else, they'll buy those because they like the wines that this guy makes. So you start with some of the most expensive fruit that you can get because it's one of the most expensive locations that you can make the fruit. The most expensive winemakers you can find, some of the most expensive equipment you can use to get the best grapes, start making it with. And then some of the best wines are made out of what's called free flow juice. Basically the weight of the grapes themselves without any pressing. You collect that juice off and you ferment and barrel age that by itself. If you're doing a big, huge jug kind of wine, you're taking those grapes and just smashing and getting every little drop of juice you can out of that stuff. But in Napa, you'll take the free flow juice, age that by itself. Then you do a light pressing and you'll age that by itself. And then finally, they'll usually press what they can out of the rest of the stuff and sell that off. The higher end wineries tend not to use that. So there you've lost some juice that you've been producing through your vineyards the whole year just because it's not going to be the best stuff. Then what are you putting that in? The jug wine or what have you is going to be in huge steel tanks to age for however long, and any flavoring to be added to it will be done somewhat artificially. So the oak flavor for, say we're making a Cabernet, and Cabernet tends to be aged in oak barrels. Well, if you're making a jugged wine, you're not going to be aging it in oak barrels because an oak barrel itself is over $1,000 when they're brand new. So how do they do it? 2 ways. Either oak flavoring liquid that they'll drop in, or oak chips that they'll have in a bag and put in the big vat or whatever it is of wine. Whereas the highest end, not just the highest end, I'll tell you pretty much all through Napa, I don't know anybody that doesn't use oak barrels. And like I said, from France, I believe they're $1,200 brand new. And you can use them depending on the wine you're making, for maybe 3 years. You get the most oak flavor out of the first year, and then as you use that, you get a little less and a little less. And I think after the third year, they say it's pretty much a neutral barrel, where you're not going to be getting any oak flavor at all anymore. But again, the highest end wineries, it's not just an oak barrel from France. We've been told some winemakers not only will go and know that it's called a cooperage is what makes a wine barrel, and they won't only use a specific cooperage, but they'll say, I want my wood from this forest here, and not only that, I want this one guy at that cooperage to make my barrels for me. And this place we went last weekend, when they get the barrels, they have to be filled with water to swell the wood to kind of make sure that they're sealed. And he will go through and taste the water that's in the barrels before they even put any wine in it, to make sure, when they make a wine barrel, they kind of burn the inside, they char it a little bit, to give some kind of caramely flavors to the wine. And you can order how much char you want, from a light char up to a dark char. And so it's those types of things where you talk liquid oak flavor in one wine versus a $1,200 barrel from a specific dude, from a specific forest, from a specific cooperage in France that gets sent to the United States. So you've got that. So then they're aging their wines in those barrels. I don't know. We haven't been to all the wineries in Napa. I would say the minimum is 9 months. The higher end wineries, the more expensive wines, you're aging for 20 months. So you've got the cost of holding the wine and paying for basically your storage, your space to hold wine for 2 years. So the next year you've got more wine to hold. So you basically have 2 vintages full of barrels is sitting there aging until they get to be where you want them to be. And then at the higher, I say higher end, but it's a lot of the Napa Valley wineries. There aren't a lot of economy wineries in Napa. They will take all their barrels when they're ready to finally put their wine in a bottle and do their blends. Because let's see, I don't know if this says what it is. This could be 100% Zinfandel. I don't have any hanging around here that say on the back. But a Cabernet out of Napa has to be 75% Cabernet. I'm just looking, I've got some bottles here we just got back and they haven't been all put away yet. No, I don't have anything. And some Cabernets are 100% Cabernet. But some have Cabernet and 10% Merlot and 3% Petit Verdot, these types of things to make kind of the flavor profile that they want. And that's standard. They'll either tell you it's 100% or they'll tell you the percentages. But they'll have a barrel of this vineyard Cabernet, and this vineyard's Cabernet will all be in separate barrels, and the Petit Verdot will be aging in these barrels, and the Merlot will be aging in these barrels. And they even take it, I've seen more extreme than that, there'll be this row is in this barrel, and this row is in this barrel, that type of a thing. And they'll taste them all, and then they'll finally decide what their final blend is going to be. And depending on the winery, we're a club at one place that makes one red wine a year. So they'll blend all their things together, make the wine that way, fill up all the bottles they can, and all the rest of their juice just gets sold off. So yes, they make money off of selling off the juice, but again, reduces their production even further doing that. A lot of wineries will have their flagship wine where they'll take the best bottles out of the lot, make a wine, and then they'll blend in other ones to make kind of one that isn't quite as expensive but still really good, those types of a thing. And then you just even get into the bottles. Obviously you can't feel this, but this is probably at least twice as heavy, maybe 3 times as much as like a $2 Chuck bottle. I have other ones that are even heavier than this. Part of that obviously is marketing. You can put it in a lighter bottle. It's not going to change the wine itself, But if you're buying a fairly expensive wine, you don't want to feel like you're picking up a $10 bottle of wine. The corks can make a difference. You've heard the term corked. That's because there's a fungus that cork is a bark of a cork oak. I think it's an oak. But it's a bark that they just peel off and cut corks out of, so it's a natural product. And if it's got this fungus on it and you stick it in your bottle of wine, it can ruin the wine. So that is the only reason, well, other than if it got too hot or whatever, but the primary reason why, if you're in a restaurant and they'll pour a little bit and you taste it, is to see if it's been corked. And it'll taste, I've heard, like wet cardboard. I haven't tasted that, but that's the time when you can send it back. Tasting a wine when you order in a restaurant isn't just for if you like it or don't. I mean, you bought it, so if it hasn't been ruined, you still should drink it. But that's why they have you taste it, is to see if it's been corked. In cheaper wines that even have a cork, they're just going to buy what they can get. More higher end wineries will get corks, again, from specific forests, and then they can pay to have batches of corks tested. And I think I've heard that they can even have individual corks tested, but they will test a bag of corks. I think it's a random sample to see if it's got this I just lost a fungus on it, to prevent any chance of that. And if it does, they'll toss the batch and buy another bag. So those are the types of things, again, that add expense to a more expensive bottle of wine. And maybe that's where we're at. So, there are people that are out there that will say that it doesn't have to cost what it does, that Napa just jacks up the prices because they can, and there certainly are wines that are like that, and they have a certain cachet, and that's obviously part of it. But again, the space is limited. They can only make so much, so if the demand is there. But you can't buy, if you're a new winemaker, you can't buy an acre of land for $1 million and all the equipment you need, and hire a great winemaker and a vineyard manager and pay all the labor and all that stuff and produce, $15 bottle of wine. So then it just becomes personal preference. Is the taste of that, all that labor, all that work, all that sorting, picking the few best barrels and all that stuff, when you drink it, is it enjoyable to you? So when I drink this, it smells great. I don't know if you can see, that color is just beautiful. And not only am I getting to enjoy the smell and the flavor, but I can also picture walking out the door, the back of that winery, and 10 feet in front of me are the vines that were planted in 1910. So there you go. If you've watched to this point, bless you. My mom thanks you for spending the time making our son happy. Anyway, hopefully you found some of this interesting. Again, a lot of it's just, some of it's fact. All the things that add to the cost are true. Whether or not it's worth it, that's up to individuals to decide. Just get out there and taste. That's all I'd say. Because everything... So here you go. This is a Merlot. You see that? There's a Merlot. I opened a Zinfandel. Whoop. What's this one? This one's Malbec. All three red wines. All three going to taste very different. So please don't just say, I've had a red wine. I've had a couple. I don't like them. I can tell you there are wines from one side of the road in Napa I don't like, from the other side I do. There's so much out there. It's just like shaving soap, guys. You can't say, I tried these 3 that I got from Target. They were junky. I'm not going to do it anymore. Give it a shot. Anyway, thanks for sitting down with me. I hope you've gotten something out of this. See you on the forums.